The scripture readings this morning include the scripture you just read with me, 1 Corinthians 13. It also includes 4 sentences: Genesis 1:26, Genesis 3:8, Exodus 3:14, and John 15:12-14, each read from the New Living Translation with my own twist. Then the Elohim, translated as God, said in a singular verb, "Let us," plural, "make," plural verb, "humans in our plural image, after our plural likeness, in our own image." When the cool of the evening breezes were blowing, the mating couple heard the ineffable, the YHWH, the unpronounceable, walking in the garden. I am that I am. I exist as I exist. Always as being, I am. And as Jesus said, "You are my friends. If you do as I say, you are my friends. Love each other as I love you. If you love each other as I love you, you are my friends." So, I mentioned that I'm a near-death experiencer. If you're interested in that, I won't talk much about that today, but it's a best-selling book. It's available in 9 editions globally, and it's my second book, and I'm working on my third book, which is what we're going to talk about today, which is Your Spirituality. So I'd like to take a little vote, or maybe a survey is a better word for it. So who here in this congregation this morning has ever experienced a deceased loved one coming to you in a dream or in an awakened state? Look at that. How many in this congregation have ever seen, felt, or heard an angel? Anyone? How many in this congregation have ever met Jesus? How many in this congregation have a deceased loved one who leaves you signs to find, and you know it's from that person? How many in this congregation have sat at the deathbed, holding a hand, and seen the soul leave the body? Now, everyone who raised their hand once, please raise your hand now. That is the majority, probably 70% of the congregation. How many people here in the congregation know this about anybody else in the congregation? Nobody. How many here, one person, we got one, but you're married, so that doesn't, or you're together, so. But that counts, okay, because you are talking about it, right? How many here talked to somebody else about this event in your life? Pretty much everybody. How many here would not have raised their hand had I not raised my hand? 1. That's good. That's good. So here's the thing about those experiences. Pretty much everybody has one, and pretty much nobody talks about it. And I think that church is the place, if there's any place there is in the United States, Canada, Australia, England, the world, where you should be able to talk about the most important spiritual experience of your life, because, oh yeah, how many here think that that was the most important spiritual experience of their life? A lot. Not everybody. They probably had other spiritual experiences. But if you can't talk about the thing that mattered to you most in your spiritual experience in church, where are you going to talk about it? Even church is not a safe place. Like, I kept my near-death experience a secret for 20 years. I came out of the closet on it because the Boothbay Harbor Congregational Church had a huge embezzlement. That's where I was the minister. It was a huge embezzlement. It was a terrible, terrible 8 years of my life, and their life too. But when it was all over, some deacon came up to me before I got in the pulpit in the morning, and he said, "Peter, we want to apologize to you for how much suffering we caused you over these years. You must have had a lot of faith to endure us." I thought to myself, well, isn't this a fine pickle? Because I don't have any faith. Because for me, God is real. God is reality. You only believe in that which you don't see. You don't believe in this, right? This is made of, as far as we know on the bottom level at the moment, corks. You don't have to believe in them to know that it's there. You do believe you begin your spiritual life in belief, but I'm willing to bet that every single person here who raised their hand had a divine experience, and you got a partial knowing. If a dead person visited you, you now know that there's life after death. You know this. You can't articulate it well, because when you say it, it diminishes it. But somehow, deep inside yourself, you've had what is called a noetic experience. It's a feeling, knowledge, experience of the divine that lodges in your soul and shifts your perspective going forward forever. If you are grieving for that person, it doesn't eliminate your grief, but it gives it a little bit of lightness. Because now you know that death is not the end. Now you know that love is eternal. Now you know that love is everlasting. Now you know that you are still loved. I'm going to postulate that globally, that's the most powerful and available spiritual experience, whether you're Zoroastrian or Jan or Muslim or Christian or Jew. It doesn't really matter, because I believe the human beings are built with a temple in our hearts, and that we are particles of God. We are like photons of light, wave and particle at the same time, and it exists inside us, and we can't see it because we live inside the veil. And the veil just isn't the world. Oh, it's the world. From the beginning of the Big Bang to the edge of the expanding cosmos, it's the world, but the veil is us. The body is the veil. It's very difficult to see through, but we get glimpses. God gives us glimpses, and we shift from belief to knowing through experience. The church in America is dying. You all know that. It's been dying for 50 years. It's dying so much now that the Southern Baptist Convention is dying. That's how far it's gone. Well, it's no wonder that people are leaving the church, because we know too much. We know that Adam and Eve is a mythology. And here's the crux of the problem for us, I think, in terms of our self-understanding. I read those scriptures today purposefully. I want to ask you a question. Is God a singular or a plural? That is the answer. That's the answer. The answer is yes. Yes, it's paradoxical. The fundamental problem that we have in talking about our spirituality is that it's paradox. You are both flesh and incarnate. You're not one or the other, you're both. You are plural. You are a singular who is plural. You are body and soul in this world. But primarily, essentially, originally, you are soul. That's who you are. That's where you're from. That's where you're going. And so the essence of our spiritual lives is to plow deeper into the interior of ourselves to see the oneness of being that lives there. And when you begin to see the oneness of being that lives inside of you, you get to see the light inside of you, and then you begin to see the light inside of others. I didn't ask, who here sees auras or halos? Yeah, there are a couple people. I bet you never talk about that to your friends very much. Maybe your dearests. When you see the light inside yourself, You begin to see it inside of others. And then morality no longer matters. It's not about the rules and regulations. It's strictly about the love. It's always ever been about the love. That's the only thing it's ever been. I give you a new commandment, he said, to love each other as I have loved you. That's it. That's the summation of it all. God is love. There's this abundant storehouse of love. And all we need to do is open our little channel to let that out. We grow it when we love each other. We share this thing that is pre-existent through us. You know, if I were a god and I was going to create humanity, I'd build inside of them an access point to me. The access point for humanity is love. Whether you love your kitty cat, or you love your grandmother, or your child, or your spouse, or your mother loved you and you never loved anybody. Any amount of love is your access point to the divine. Love is the only thing there is. That's all you get to take with you. I know this. That's what happened to me. The only thing I brought back to heaven with me was the love that was given to me. And the love that I gave away, it turned out I could keep it all. That is the treasure of life. We muck it all up with all these rules and regulations, all these doctrines and dogmas, all these wars, all these conflicts. But really, essentially, it's one thing. It's love. And that's all we need to do. That's all we need to do. Nobody's staying here. Nobody gets to stay unless, of course, I was talking to the good doctor up here early. We're talking about the 21st century and the rise of immortality of humanity and the combination of using AI, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, genetics, biology. Yeah, we're going to be able to stay here longer, but who wants to do that? Not me. Death is my freedom, baby. Death is the way out of here. I was going to preach a sermon today instead on suffering and hell. I was going to close all the windows, turn all the lights on, right? And then make you stand for the whole sermon. That's what life is like. Life is a lot like that, but I can tell you heaven is not. Heaven is beauty and joy, love, bliss, adoration, understanding, knowledge, compassion, all as one thing. It's where you're from and where you're going. You just forgot. You'll remember. And every time you have a divine experience like you had, that's a little bit of remembrance. Oh, that's who I am. Oh, that's the truth. Love does not end. I am still loved by my beloved, who I've lost, who I will see again, who came to me to tell me I am loved. It's a beautiful thing. I'm working on my third book now, and my point in this book is that there are millions of mystics in America. There's a word that was tossed out with the age of reason. Mysticism got a bad reputation. We think it's all incense and crystals. It's not. Mysticism is an experience that's noetic, transient, passive, and unspeakable. You don't make it happen. You didn't make that dead person come to you. You didn't make the knowledge that lodged in your soul. You didn't start it or end it, but it was quick. And every time you speak of it, it's diminished. And mystical experiences include Julian of Norwich, John of the Cross, all of the great mystics of the church. It includes you, it includes me, it includes all near-death experiencers. We're all in the same boat. No one's spirituality is above anybody else's. We're just stuck in these bodies without remembrance, because each one of us is soul first. And because you are soul first, that's who you become when you die. The first thing that happened to me when I died, when I was in heaven, a place of timelessness and non-being with no things, was I thought to myself, This is who I am. This is who I've always been. How did I not know that? Death is a return to self. Living is a blindness in the world. Why is it this way? I don't know. I'm not even interested in asking that question. I'm much more interested in trying to figure out how to open wider and allow the channel of love and peace to flow through me wider, and to form a community of people willing to talk about it on a large scale. Because here's the thing, if all of you here in this church, and there's probably, I'm going to guess, 70 to 80% of you raised your hand, right? And some of you who didn't, you're just young yet, and you probably will have some kind of that experience later on. But if that's true in church, imagine how that's true across America. And who's talking about the depth of their spirituality, that they know that God is real? And that's been a bad word in Christianity. You're not supposed to know God. That's Gnosticism. That's bad news. But here's the truth. You know a part of God. As it said in 1 Corinthians, now you know in part, then you will know in full. Now there's a veil, but then the veil will be lifted, and you'll see face to face, eye to eye. That is the truth. If we live the truth that you are beloved by God and that you have access to the divine each individually and that you've already experienced it, if you can bring that into your daily life where you are, thinking that other people already know this, imagine a social transformation, a societal transformation. You know, since the time of Paul, we've been waiting for the end times. Yeah, everybody has an end time. You have yours and I have mine. Yeah. I'm going to end with this. There's a global phenomenon happening. It started in the 1960s with the advent of cardiac care, when cardiac care began bringing back the dead. And now, 50 years later, that technology has advanced and expanded around the globe to every modern nation, and even nations that aren't modern. Wherever they have medical science, with paddles or injections or open heart surgeries, heart massages, there are 10 million Americans now, 4% of the American population, who've had near-death experiences. That's just our country. Medical science is driving spirituality. That's a first. There's a new thing under the sun. The Bible, I don't have a Bible, and it's in here. The Bible has 6, 7, 8, and if you count Jesus, 9 near-death experiences. Elijah had 3, Jesus had 3, Peter had 1, Paul had 1, and Jesus. 9 in that were notable enough that they made it into the only book there was. 9 over 3,000 years. 10 million now. I didn't ask, who here's a near-death experiencer? Anybody? Anybody else? Got one in the back. Usually there's 1, sometimes there's 3. There's a new thing under the sun. Spirituality is being driven by science. And these two things are not only not mutually exclusive, they're symbiotic. They work together. It's gotten to the point where science has now taken an interest for the last 10 or 15 years because so many people on operating tables were talking to surgeons. Oh, I heard your conversation. How could you hear my conversation? You were dead. I don't know. I was out of my body. How can you be out of your body? This year, a paper was published by a guy named Sam Parnia, Dr. Sam Parnia from Stony Brook, also from Southampton University, in this paper. And this is scientific language, okay? So he's not gonna say more than he knows. We can now say that consciousness survives death for a period of time. Consciousness does not arise in the body. It is not a biological function of the brain. It's a download software. And you live inside an avatar. This is like the Matrix, only it's not the evil overlord machines. It's the divine, loving God. We just blind to it, that's all. I want to start a national conversation about your spiritual experience. And the only way I can help that happen is by asking you to talk to each other about it and bring it to your home churches. Be willing to stand up in church and say, who here's done this? Who here's had this experience? You'll discover that you're not alone. You'll discover that most of us have a partial knowledge of God. And all together, piled into one, we get a bigger picture. But we won't know that unless we talk about it. So that's what I'm here today to tell you. I'm here to ask you to begin to speak about the most important spiritual experiences of your life, because pretty much everybody had one and pretty much nobody talks about it. Last thing I'll say as an example. Do you know I sit on the Domestic Violence Homicide Review Panel for the state of Maine. I read homicide files. Do you know how that came about? Do you know why we talk about domestic violence now? Do you remember in the 1950s, the cop would, it's a family thing. Nobody ever talked about domestic violence. It changed in the 1970s because Marie Fortune started talking about it. Started telling people to talk about it. And now we have domestic violence shelters all over the United States. We have panels in every single state trying to figure out ways to stop the homicides. Only because people were brave enough, courageous enough to stand up and say, I'm abused, and not feel shame. I draw a parallel here. It's time to have some courage and stand up and say, I'm an experiencer of the divine. I think you are too. Amen.